Imagine opening your child's report card and finding 3 Fs. Failed reading, failed writing, and failed feeding yourself. I think we can all agree we would never accept the first 2. We would immediately know that there was something wrong, that we'd have to summon everything we had, all our parental skills, the school. Yet somehow, we've let the 3rd one go, haven't we? I'm here to talk about something that's even more important than our ability to read and write and maneuver in a world of words and numbers, namely our individual and shared knowledge of how to feed ourselves. For some strange reason, we as a society haven't even bothered to name this ability. I call it culinary literacy. Culinary literacy is important because food is important. Food is the foundation of life, nothing less. It's the most universal thing we have, as universal as our breathing or our heartbeats. In fact, it is what powers them. The food that I've eaten has given me the energy to do everything I've ever done. It's built every cell in my body. Every time I've climbed the stairs or reached for the remote or thrown a tantrum or said a kind word to someone I love, the food is behind every neuron fired in my head. In fact, ultimately, it is behind my ability to read and write. Right now, there is a global culinary literacy crisis as more and more people are losing their ability to know how to eat, basically how to feed ourselves. And this is strange because for as long as we've been humans have passed down essential knowledge about food, from selecting and preparing food to preserving and sharing it. And this didn't just sustain us and feed us, it is what made us human. So where did this knowledge go? My grandmother, she grew up on a farm and she was this natural cook. She cooked with such ease and she ate with a quiet appreciation of someone who knew the value of food. Whenever she cooked dinner, she would always have potatoes, and not these supermodel potatoes we have today with smooth, perfect skin, but thick-skinned potatoes that you had to peel and that had lots of flavor. And when she started eating dinner, she would always start out peeling the potatoes, and then she would take a little break of appreciation and she'd say, potatoes. Like that was her favorite thing. Even more important than the lamb or the fish or the stew or whatever else was on the plate. Because potatoes was her favorite thing. She lived until she was 97 years old, and I learned a lot from her, simple homemade cooking. And when I quit the university and started working with food, most of the people around me, they were shocked. I come from a family that values education. My father taught philosophy at the university. My mother was a psychologist and a family therapist. Yeah, I know what you're thinking. I survived. They got divorced. Happy ending. Others were teachers, doctors, professors. And I think most of them thought that this difficult and unruly but kind of smart kid was giving up on his family commitment to knowledge. But my grandmother thought it differently. In our family, we have always worked with food, and food is knowledge, she reminded me. And she was right. If you look at my family history, they were farmer, then teacher, philosophy professor, and food writer. So I'm back, full circle. Through my work, I have visited some spectacular restaurants. I've gotten to know some of the best chefs in the world, and I've done some crazy stuff like traveling to the Amazon to taste the world's best ants. I've opened restaurants, done cooking shows, and written books. But nothing has been as important as working with children and food. After I had kids on my own, I started seeing the world through their eyes. and I saw that there is no system to support their culinary education. And that makes for a really uneven playground. The last 15 years, I've been involved in a non-profit called Geitmyra Culinary Centers. And our centers are around Norway, but we also do collaborations with projects and partners in Tanzania and Kenya in Africa. We work with schools and we integrate cooking into the school curriculum. That's really delicious education. It's not about creating the next star chef. It's not about dinner parties and gastronomy. It's much more in the spirit of my grandmother. Simple stuff, basic stuff, really important knowledge. And I remember this kid who was 11. He was in one of the first classes at the culinary center. Let's call him Alex. At the start of the day, the teacher from his school leaned over and said, you should look out for him because he was a bit of a troubled child. And yeah, Alex was a bit of a challenge. He didn't like to sit still, but first of all, he didn't know how to hold a knife. He couldn't recognize basic ingredients like potatoes. And when we asked him who did the cooking at his home, he looked at us with this sort of puzzled look, as if I'd ask you, who makes the light bulbs in your house? I don't know. They come from the store. Light comes on by flicking a switch. But Alex loved cooking. He loved chopping and frying, loved making aioli, how it came together when he whisked it. It became something else, something new. And he loved the vegetable soup he made together with his classmates. He'd never tasted anything like it, and he loved it. And he was particularly proud that he had made it himself. He loved the power it gave him. Through my work at the Culinary Center, I witnessed daily how the culinary literacy crisis cuts across social classes. Children arrive unable to recognize basic ingredients, reflecting homes where cooking skills have vanished. Often, they're a little scared to enter a kitchen, but they're also curious. The lack of basic culinary literacy is life-threatening. I would say civilization-threatening. According to the World Health Organization, the number of children who are struggling with overweight and obesity has more than doubled the last 30 years, up from around 9% in 1990 to over 20%. Among adults, the number who's struggling with overweight and obesity has tipped 40%. And there's no silver lining. We are heading in the wrong direction. Right now, there's an ongoing pandemic of overweight, obesity, and lots of other lifestyle-related illnesses that's spreading globally, not just in the rich, developed world, but just as much, or even more, in Asia, Africa, Latin America. And there are many culprits. Poverty, inequality, a broken food system. But one thing is certain, we cannot protect ourselves against this pandemic without a vaccine, a cultural vaccine, and that vaccine is knowledge. Knowledge of how to feed ourselves, to take the right food choices, and to cook delicious food for ourselves. Culinary literacy. So, how can we spread culinary literacy? Luckily, the answer to that question is pretty simple. The same way we teach more classic literacy, we need to get it into the school curriculum. Many of you know the brilliant educator Ken Robinson, and many of you have seen his very popular TED Talk. And Sir Ken is a great defender of the arts and creativity. And he has pointed out a serious flaw in our education system, where we have created a hierarchy where we place math and science at the top, and then humanities, and then arts at the bottom. Yeah, I don't disagree, but Sir Ken forgot food, which has a tendency to be placed even lower, so it's not even a part of that list. In the lunch break, the kids eat. But they're not supposed to learn anything. It's a break from learning. The pupils are treated like cars at a petrol station being filled up so that they can keep going learning math. To the extent that schools have any culinary education, this tends to be the lowest priority. We still expect children to learn these vital skills at home as if we were living in an agrarian distant past, like when my grandmother grew up. By the way, my grandfather couldn't cook at all. He was never invited into the kitchen. We don't expect kids to learn how to read, write, and do math all by themselves, do we? You have never, ever heard someone say, "Hey, go home, teach yourself some algebra." But how can we then expect them to learn culinary literacy? I'm sure you've heard people say that there's much bigger interest in food nowadays than there used to be. And in a way, it's true, in the sense that there are more restaurants, more cooking shows and star chefs. And in the old days, no one had heard of a food writer. But much of it is just consumption. While we celebrate food culture more than ever, we are actually losing our fundamental ability to feed ourselves. By naming and understanding culinary literacy, we can begin to treat it with the same importance as reading and writing. And the great thing about teaching culinary literacy is that it doesn't take resources away from the other subjects. So if you don't believe in the importance of good, healthy food in itself, like I do, then maybe this will convince you to support culinary literacy. It makes the kids better at math. One of the things we often see at the culinary center is that the unruly kid, like Alex, the trouble pupil, very often excels when he's given a knife and some ingredients, and that this delicious education also makes it easier to learn lots of other stuff. Because when you're learning culinary literacy, you're also learning practical mathematics, science, language, geography. A recipe is a very practical way to use numbers. And we have a course in edible mathematics. And take a thing like chlorophyll. It's not just something described on a page in a science book. It's something the kids can grow, harvest, cook, and eat. I believe that kids have this innate ability to relate to the world around them with all senses and an all-encompassing primal connection. Everyone is inspired when the education is delicious. Everyone is learning. When they learn about food and cooking, they learn skills that they will keep with them for the rest of their lives. Some of the kids who come to the Culinary Center end up working with food. In fact, we have a program called the Junior Chefs, where young kids are given their first jobs and they're trained by Michelin-starred chefs. But to most of them, this is not a professional path. A few months ago, I met Alex again, the young kid who didn't know how to hold a knife. Of course, I didn't recognize him. He wasn't a kid anymore. He was a young man. But he told me that although he wasn't a chef and didn't make very advanced food, he liked to cook. He still likes to make the vegetable soup he learned at the Culinary Center and he made with his classmates. Although sometimes I add chicken, he said. And he had a few other specialties. One was a pasta dish that he had made for his girlfriend on their first date. And one was a dish that he likes to make with his 3-year-old son. And I asked him how often he cooked. And he answered almost with the same puzzled look as when I asked him many years ago who did the cooking at home. Only this time, the answer was quite different. He said, I don't know, every day. Nothing fancy, but a little something every day. Through my work at the Culinary Center, I've seen that this delicious education delivers results. We need to work together to prevent our young ones from failing in feeding themselves. It's time we start giving culinary literacy the place it deserves in our education system, right at the heart of it.